The story starts in as twin brothers, Smock and Stank, have earned a lot of money abroad and have now returned to their village. Together, they decide to open a unique club, a place of entertainment, especially for the downtrodden and oppressed in society. As soon as the club opens, crowds of people flock there. Everyone is dancing and singing joyfully, even during a time when discrimination is at its peak. A glow of freedom and happiness lights up every face in the crowd. Just then, a foreign woman tries to enter the club, but the bouncer at the door stops her. However, as soon as the woman tells him her name, Mary, the bouncer smiles. Mary is the same girl who used to spend time with Stank and Smock in their childhood. After the death of their mother, it was Mary's mother who raised both of them. Despite being white-skinned, Mary had a deep bond with the brothers. That's why she is the only foreign woman allowed into the club. Meanwhile, a singer named Sammy is enchanting the crowd on stage with his melodious performance. Everyone is lost in his music. At the same time, three strangers approach the club. The bouncer becomes alert as soon as he sees them. These people have come with a different kind of cunning and intention. One of them, Bod, claims to be a musician and says that he was drawn in by the music coming from inside. He and his two companions then go on stage and perform a song. But Smoke and Stank do not like it. They clearly say, "This place is for native tunes only. You can take your tunes to some other club." But then Smoke notices me. I'm fair-skinned, yet inside the club. That bothers him, and he tries to get in again. Stuck is now forced to pull out a gun from his pocket. The three strangers retreat, but they don't actually leave. They sit nearby and start singing again. Mary goes up to them to find out what their intentions really are. Bo instantly reads her emotions. Her mother had passed away recently, and she had come to the club to deal with that pain. Bo says, "I wish I had met you earlier. Maybe I could have saved your mother. Now it's time to save you." Mary feels something strange. She sees a red gleam in Bo's eyes and notices saliva dripping from his mouth. Instantly, she pulls out her pistol and orders all three to step back. Just as she turns toward the club, Bo suddenly flies through the air toward her. Mary is now seen outside the club. She asks the bouncer to let her in again, and he allows her. A little while later, the bouncer needs to go to the bathroom, so he puts someone else in charge of the entrance. As he walks into the nearby forest, he hears strange noises. It feels like someone, or many eyes, are watching him. Meanwhile, Mary calls Smoke to a secluded spot. Stuck notices that blood is dripping from Mary's lips. Mary doesn't suspect a thing. She is so lost that all she wants is another sip. But the truth is, a vampire had already bitten her on the shoulder. At that moment, someone inside the club was losing control due to intoxication. So Smoke had sent his partner Sammy to call Stuck to help manage the situation. But as soon as Sammy went to look for Stack, he saw that Stack and Mary were lost in each other. He couldn't bear to watch it, but Smoke didn't waste any time. He went there himself. What he saw left him stunned. Mary, who had just been shot, suddenly got up from the ground, and there was a terrifying smile on her face. She quickly ran out of the club and disappeared. Smoke didn't chase after her. His attention was now on Stack, who was severely wounded. Smoke tried to stop the bleeding, but it wouldn't stop. Within moments, Stack took his last breath. No one had imagined the first night at the club would be this horrifying. Smoke sent the others out of the club. Now only 3 people remained inside: Smoke, his wife Perrine, and Stack's body. Annie suggested that Stack's body should be kept outside because the bullets fired at Mary had no effect. Perhaps she was no longer human, and if Mary had bitten Stack. Smoke was overwhelmed with grief. He couldn't just leave his brother's body outside like that. Eventually, they decided to lock Stack's body in a small room at the back. Meanwhile, Cornbread, the bouncer who had been standing at the club's entrance, returned. But strangely, he remained standing at the door and didn't come inside. He said to Smoke, "Give me an invitation. Only then can I come in." Annie found this odd. Until now, no one had ever needed an invitation. Cornbread explained, "Bro, it's just good manners. It doesn't feel right to enter without being invited." But now even Smoke began to suspect something. When he was a bouncer, no one ever needed an invitation to enter. Smoke didn't believe him, but Cornbread said he had just come to collect his wages for the day. Smoke thought for a while and then gave him the money. But as soon as the others saw the light coming from his hands and the glow in his eyes, they all understood. He was no longer human. Fortunately, Annie quickly pulled Smoke inside the club, and that's when they realized that unless someone is invited in, A vampire cannot enter. Just then, a sound came from the back room. Stack peeked through a crack in the door. Stack was now alive again. He immediately ran to get the keys. But by then, Stack, who was probably no longer entirely human, broke down the door himself and came out. Annie brought out a bowl of pungent pickle and placed it in front of everyone. As soon as some of it spilled on a Stack, he screamed in pain and fled from the club. Annie was now completely convinced that everyone who had been bitten tonight had turned into a vampire. According to her, when a human is bitten by a vampire, their soul becomes trapped inside their body, and they wander the earth filled with rage and a thirst for revenge. There is only one way to kill such a creature: either expose them to sunlight or drive a wooden stake straight through their heart. A little later, another dead body was found inside the club. For safety, they took it outside. But the sight outside was even more terrifying. All the people who had been thrown out of the club earlier had now become vampires. They were all hovering outside the club, dancing and singing under the leadership of their leader, Beau. The more joy there was outside, the more fear had gripped the inside of the club. Annie suggested that everyone eat a little bit of pickle as a precaution. If there was a vampire, he wouldn't be able to eat this. Everyone ate it, and no one was affected. That meant everyone inside the club was still human. Just then, there was a knock at the door. A man was standing there. He had come to take his wife, Grace, back, but he could only enter if someone invited him in. Everyone understood. That man had now become a vampire too. Meanwhile, he stepped in and started threatening Grace. "If you don't invite me in, I'll go to your daughter." Hearing this, Grace was devastated. People quickly shut the door, but Grace wasn't someone who gave up easily. She told Smoke, "Now it's time to fight back." But Annie said, "Just wait until sunrise. Everything will be okay." Suddenly, vampire music started playing outside again. Grace was looking at her husband through the window, tears rolling down her cheeks. She didn't want to lose her daughter. She picked up a wooden stake and tried to go outside, but Smoke and Annie stopped her. The man outside was now smiling. Someone had already invited him in. People inside the club also picked up weapons. Premix brought the vampire in. The vampires were in greater numbers, and the fight was tough. Annie got bitten by Stack, who had now fully turned into a vampire. Smoke's heart broke. Stack was his younger brother, the same one who had killed his wife. At that moment, Grace picked up a gun and shot Stack. Annie gave Smoke a wooden stake and said, "I don't want to become a vampire and kill innocent people." With a heavy heart, Smoke pierced her heart. Then Smoke wounded himself so that his blood would attract the vampires and give the others a chance to escape. But just as they tried to escape through the back door, Ewan was standing there. His real target was Sammy, because he had been deeply captivated by her voice and wanted her to be his forever. A woman standing behind showed bravery and stabbed away Remick in the back with a wooden stick, but she couldn't pierce his heart. Enraged, Remick turned around and bit the woman. Taking advantage of the moment, Sammy ran away, but she didn't get far. The vampire chased her down and pushed her into the lake. Meanwhile, Smoke and Andrew Stack were now face to face. This was perhaps the final clash between the two brothers. Their bond was so deep that when Smoke tried to drive a wooden spear into his younger brother Stack's heart, a glimpse of humanity returned to Stack's eyes for a moment. On the other side, Remick had gripped Sammy's neck tightly, but at the right moment, Sammy grabbed her nearby guitar and struck Remick hard on the head. The vampire didn't die, and again caught hold of Sammy's neck. Just then, Smoke arrived at the perfect time and drove the wooden spear into Remick's heart. In the next moment, Remick's body was engulfed in flames and surrounded by a cloud of smoke. Slowly, the first rays of the sun began to rise, and as the sunlight fell on the vampires, they began to burn one by one. Within moments, all of them collapsed to the ground and turned to ash. However, Remick was still not entirely destroyed. Flames continued to rise from his body, and then a violent whirlwind lifted his burning form into the air, until he disintegrated and vanished completely. Now only Smokesy and Asha and Sammy remained. Sammy hugged Smoke, and they said their goodbyes to each other. Smoke sat alone on the ground, and just then he had a strange dream. In it, Annie, who was no longer alive, was handing him a child. Smoke held the child with trembling hands. A flood of emotions surged in his heart. A life that could have been his, but now was only a dream. He made up his mind that he would meet Annie only in the afterlife.